Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says he doesn't believe Hamas will leave Qatar, where it has a political office. He made the comments to reporters whilst returning from a trip to Iraq. Mr. Erdogan said the important thing is not where the group's leaders are, but what is happening in Gaza. There'd been days of media reports that Hamas might leave Qatar. Shortly after President Erdogan made those comments, we heard from Qatar's foreign ministry on the matter. Here's what they had to say.
Regarding the Hamas office here in Doha, this office was opened in coordination with the United States for the purpose of mediation between both sides. As long as their presence here in Doha, as we have always said, is useful and positive in this mediation effort, they will remain here in Doha. That said, of course, as we said, we are reassessing our role as mediators, but any decisions regarding this issue will not be taken unless we are finished with that reassessment and we are ready to convey the results of this reassessment.
Well, for more on all those stories, I'm joined now by Arise international correspondent Faith Orr. Good to see you, Faith. 200 days into the war in Gaza, the Israeli army reported to have carried out its heaviest bombardment in weeks, much of it in northern Gaza, but also some areas struck in the south. Tell us more.
They've actually ordered another evacuation of northern Gaza because of this bombardment in areas around Beit Lahia, which is near Gaza City. Now, as we know, there is no safe space left in Gaza. Most of the Palestinians have fled to the south to Rafah, which is also being struck. 75% of Gaza Strip's population is now displaced. As we say, most of them in Rafah, about 1.5 million displaced people now sheltering there. But many, many strikes all over the Strip today, northern, central, southern areas. I was actually listening to a report done by one of my friends who's in Gaza. He's in Rafah. But you could almost barely hear what he was saying because of the Israeli drones overhead. So it's constant bombardment on a daily basis, but it almost seems like they've marked the 200 days by upping the bombardment today.
We understand there's also been an increase in hostile exchanges between Hezbollah in Lebanon and Israel. What are you hearing about that?
We are hearing that there has been, the Lebanon's Hezbollah say that they have fired its deepest into Israel as, since this war began. Now, Israel, for its part, says it has killed 2 Hezbollah fighters. 4 others were wounded in that strike. It was a drone strike in a car on southern Lebanon. And we're hearing from security sources that the way they're doing this is they are monitoring the homes of Hezbollah fighters and monitoring their comings and goings. And then they'll target them when they're in the car with drones. So that is how they're managing to target so many individual Hezbollah fighters rather than, carrying out a large airstrike, for instance. Hezbollah has confirmed that at least one of its fighters was killed today. The person wasn't a commander; he was a sort of field operative, if you will. It's not like, it's not like they took out any of the kind of top level men. But it is an increase, and it does show you what Israel is doing here. They are not slowing down. They are very much saying, if you continue to target us, we are going to continue to target you.
Sounds absolutely terrifying. Meanwhile, of course, Israel's military has rejected accusations that its forces buried the bodies of Palestinians at a medical complex in Gaza, or 2 hospitals, describing the Palestinian allegation as baseless and unfounded. Some horrible discoveries at those hospitals in the aftermath of an Israeli operation.
Exactly. So it was 2 hospitals. It was Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis and it was Al-Shifa in Gaza City. The most recent events were in Nasser hospitals. So Israeli forces had besieged that hospital for a number of weeks, putting medical staff, patients under heavy gunfire. I mean, the pictures once they withdrew from there was just utter devastation. I mean, the hospital was just left in ruins. And now we're hearing of these mass graves. So in Nasser Hospital in the grounds, we're hearing of hundreds of people in these mass graves, many elderly, women, people with their hands bound. Israel says it wasn't them. Israel says they found the mass graves, they took the bodies out, they examined them to see if they were any of the captives who are being held in Gaza. They claimed those examinations were done respectfully, if that's at all possible, and then they were put back where they were found, they were reburied. But when they were found by the Palestinians, they were under mounds of waste. You know, it doesn't sound like there was much respectful about it. Several hundred in Nasser, another 30 in Al-Shifa in Gaza City. Of course, Israeli forces withdrew from there a while ago. We do know that Palestinians have resorted to burying their own dead in the hospital grounds simply because it hasn't been safe for them to go elsewhere. But those people would not be found with their hands bound.
Meanwhile, Qatar denying reports that it has told Hamas to move its political headquarters from Doha. Doha, of course, you've spent some time there.
I have. I don't see them telling Hamas to leave Doha. I don't see that happening. What did slightly surprise me is that Qatar is now reassessing its role as a mediator. Because Hamas have had an office there for some time. Doha was also a huge mediator when it came to the talks with the Taliban in Afghanistan. This is the role that they play on the international stage, but they say they're receiving so much criticism for hosting Hamas and for playing this role that they are reconsidering it. They say it's not helpful to be receiving all of this criticism when actually they're one of the countries doing as much they can to try and end the war. And that is why they're reconsidering that role. But they say at the moment, they say no reason for Hamas to leave. Of course, Hamas are there with an agreement with the US as well. So it's not like Qatar is out on its own doing this. This has been internationally negotiated. I'd be very surprised if they went anywhere.
And very briefly, because I've just been warned that we're virtually out of time, let's turn to that Israel-Iran confrontation that dominated the news last week and led to missiles being fired against each other. Has the dust now settled on that conflict or not completely?
You know, when you asked me that this morning, I was going to say, yeah, it sounds like it has. No, because since this morning, we've heard from Iran, and they are being very vitriolic, and they have said if Israel does anything else to attack their territory, it will lead to there being nothing left of, and it's Iran's words, the Zionist regime. We've also heard from Qassam Brigades, which of course is the armed wing of Hamas, their spokesman Abu Ubaida, who's calling for an escalation on all fronts. So it doesn't sound like at this 200-day mark anyone is simmering down.
Faith, thank you very much indeed. Faith Orr is Arise International.